Pirouette is a beautiful yarn with a very unique construction. Once you learn this simple technique to work with Pirouette, you can create dramatic results with very little effort. It takes just one ball of Patons Pirouette to make a scarf. Patons Pirouette will make a scarf approximately 55 inches long. Patons Pirouette Shimmer makes a scarf approximately 52 inches long, and Patons Pirouette Sparkle makes a scarf approximately 49 inches long. To make a ruffle scarf with Patons Pirouette, you will need one ball of Patons Pirouette yarn, a pair of 4.5mm needles, a large eye blunt needle to darn in your ends, or a sewing needle and thread to match your yarn, and a pair of scissors. Patons Pirouette is a very uniquely constructed yarn, so if we pull out a strand here and take a look at it, I'll show you what we're going to be working into. So one edge has this decorative edge right here, and the rest of the yarn is sort of a mesh. And what we're going to be working into to cast on and to make a ruffle scarf is actually this edge. We'll be working into the spaces along the free edge of the yarn. To cast on with Patons Pirouette, we're going to take our yarn, leave a slight tail of a few inches, and we can deal with that later when we're finished, and we're going to work into these spaces along the edge of the yarn. So to cast on, it's really easy. I'm just going to take my needle and insert it from back to front into this space along the edge. Now to create a ruffle scarf, we're going to be working into every second space along the edge of the yarn. So for my next stitch, I'm going to work back to front into the second space, skipping one. So now I've cast on 2 stitches. I'm going to miss the next space, insert my needle from back to front, and just go along here until I've got 5 stitches, missing every second space. So now I've got 5 stitches here on the needle, and I'm ready to knit. To knit with Patons Pirouette, it's really easy. I've got my 5 stitches cast on here, which is all you need to make a scarf. And first I'm going to turn my work before we start knitting, just like you normally would, so that your yarn coming from the ball is on the right here. So I'm going to hold my cast on stitches in my left hand, and with my right hand needle I'm going to insert it from front to back into the first stitch, and then I'm going to miss this first space here on my working yarn, take the second space, and just catch that, pull that over my right hand needle. Then I'm going to draw that loop through, and it's just the edge of the yarn I'm pulling through, and slide that stitch off the left hand needle. So let me show you that again. On the second stitch, I'm going to insert my right hand needle from front to back, miss the first space, and knit into the second space. So the reason that we're skipping these spaces is to create the ruffle effect for our scarf. And you'll begin to see how that works when you've got a few more rows knit. Working into the second space. Insert your right hand needle from front to back. Miss the first space. Knit into the second space and draw it through. So the only real difference here from regular knitting is that we're just catching the edge of the yarn and drawing it through rather than pulling the whole width of the yarn through. I've got my first row knit, turn, and repeat. So one more time, insert your right hand needle from front to back through your first stitch, miss the first working space of your yarn, take the second space and just draw that over your right hand needle, draw the edge through, and slide off your left hand needle. And that's it. So here we have our ruffle scarf just about completed, and you can see now the ruffle effect that we get from working into every second space of the yarn. Now to cast off, you're going to want to leave enough yarn here that's about 3 or 4 times the width of your scarf. So you can just eyeball that, or you can even count the spaces you've got left to work with. So you know, with some simple math, I've got 5 stitches. I want to leave about 20 working spaces to cast off with, just to make the most of your yarn. To cast off with Patons Pirouette, I'm going to show you a technique that's slightly different than our normal cast off. And what it's going to do is create a looser cast off so that the edge of our scarf doesn't bunch up and pull. It's really easy. So first, I'm going to knit my first stitch, just as we normally have, working into the second space of the yarn. And then I'm going to take that stitch and just slide it back to the left-hand needle, being careful not to twist it. Then I'm going to knit that stitch a second time. And once I've knit that stitch twice, then I'm going to move on to the next stitch on my left-hand needle and knit it. And then I'm going to pass the first stitch that I knit over the second to cast off 1 stitch. So once I've got my 1 stitch on my right hand needle, I'm going to do the same thing again, slide it back to the left hand needle and knit it a second time. So what we're doing here by knitting each stitch twice is just creating a little extra length for when we're drawing that stitch over and casting off, and it creates a looser cast off. So now I've knit my stitch twice. I'm going to knit the next stitch on my left hand needle, draw that stitch over. Now with my 1 stitch, I have to remember I'm going to knit it twice, so I have to slide it back to the left hand needle, knit it a second time, and we're always working into the second space of our working yarn, just like we did for knitting the ruffle scarf. Once I've got that knit twice, I'm going to knit the next stitch on my left hand needle, then draw the first stitch on my right hand needle over the second to cast off, slip that stitch back to the left hand needle, knit it twice. We're almost done. I'm going to knit the last stitch because we have just 5 stitches for our ruffle scarf. Knit the last stitch, draw that stitch over, and once you're left with just 1 stitch on your needle, I'm going to slip the needle out and I'm going to take the yarn tail and just feed it through that loop to secure it. And that's all there is to it. To finish off our Patons Pirouette scarf, we're going to want to weave in our ends. So what I've done here is take a large-eyed blunt tip needle and threaded the end of my yarn through. Now you're going to want a needle with a very large eye to be able to fit that yarn through there. So once I've done that, all I'm going to do is just weave the yarn, the needle, back and forth along the cast off edge. And it's not really super important to get it in an exact spot because there's so much texture in this yarn, no one's going to be able to see. So I just need to tug on that a little bit. You know, you've got all the sequins in there. They might catch a little, but don't worry about it too much. Nobody's going to see at the end. And once I've pulled that through, I'll take my needle out and then I can just trim the end. But before I do that, I'll just mention that another way to do it would be to trim this end quite short, fold it over, and just take some sewing thread and just catch a little bit of the edge in there, and the ruffle will just hide that end there if you want to be really neat about it. And that's it.